presidents get so involved in Republican primaries this early in their presidencies. Not only is the president taking sides in the Republican primary, he's attacking the Republican majority leader. He's basically saying maybe he made a mistake in making his choice, and saying that, even if, my selection, my endorsed candidate loses, I am willing to, endorse and back the other candidate, even though he also said that he believes that Roy Moore would have trouble against the Democrats. So not necessarily message discipline, but he seems to have done well during the general election in Alabama, and I think he thinks that his instincts there are going to help him.
We'll see, but it is an interesting choice for the president. You know this from being on the Hill. Donald Trump was the disruptor in 2016. Here, he is siding with the establishment, with Mitch McConnell, with the National Republican Senatorial Committee, with the Chamber of Commerce. The NRA is involved here on Luther Strange's behalf. But the president is on the other side of most of the people, the nationalists, the populists, the pitchfork people in the Republican Party in this race. But they sold the president on this, saying if Roy Moore comes to the Senate, you think it was hard to get Obamacare in the first 7 months? You bring Roy Moore to the United States Senate, you're going to get zip.
And you won't be able to trust him, and what it could set off going forward that could only be problematic to your agenda. Look, there's no question about it. This isn't the establishment side of the Republican Party, the Chamber of Commerce side, is on one side here. And Steve Bannon and Breitbart and Seb Gorka and pretty much the entire kind of arm of the Trump wing, if you will, of the Republican Party is on the other side here. And the president's on the establishment side. And that was a very big push from Senator McConnell, a very big push from that establishment Republican kind of ecosphere to get him on that side. I think the most interesting part about Rally Trump is he says the inside things out loud, which makes it a lot easier to report on, because these are the things you're relying on aides to say on background, like giving you the real true story here. Everything the president laid out is the reality of the situation. This was an incredibly difficult issue for him to come down on. This is something that aides inside the White House were split on both sides. This is something that Senator Mitch McConnell worked very hard to get his support for, and he will likely go campaign for Roy Moore if Roy Moore wins this primary. He said it all out loud. You don't even need background sourcing on that, which is helpful. But I do think in terms of longer term for the Republican Party, for future primaries, Tuesday is a very big and a very clarifying moment.
We are grateful he doesn't have an inner voice, as they say. But Phil's point, if Roy Moore wins, we will see more challengers, won't we?
Yes, well, and it'd also be interesting if Roy Moore wins and he has pulled ahead, when people repeat exactly what the president just said, that he was unable to pull him across the line, and he goes, that's unfair. That'll be an interesting moment.
Who told you that?
But look, I think this is a test of whether sort of the Trumpian instinct and the anti-establishment, fire of the Republican Party is actually stronger than real Trump standing in front of Alabama voters. And we've seen reporting that, and it does not surprise me at all, that many of the rally goers are pro-Trump and came to see Trump, but are not pro-Luther Strange. And it's unclear to me how those align. Many people have decided that the unifying theme of the Republican Party is to be anti-McConnell.
And it is my bet, to the anti-McConnell point, it is my bet that if Roy Moore wins on Tuesday night, by either late Tuesday night or Wednesday morning, what you'll get out of Team Trump is the president did his best. He did get him closer to the end. We'll see what the numbers are. But this was McConnell's fault. The atmosphere against McConnell is so deep out there with the Republican base, you can't do it. And the polling supports that. Look at our new CNN poll by SSRS. These are Republicans only. Is the president taking the country in the right direction? 79% of Republicans say yes. Only 16% say the president's taking the country in the wrong direction. Again, these are Republicans only. How about Republican leaders in Congress? 40% of Republicans say right direction. 53% of Republicans say their leadership in Congress is taking the party in the wrong direction. So there's no question President Trump capitalized on this in the 2016 campaign. The Republican base is angry at the performance of their leaders here in Washington. This race is going to go a long way in either, it's not going to settle that, it's not going to close that divide, but boy, it could blow it wide open.
As John McCain might say, the only Republicans that are supportive of the Republican leaders are his close friends and family, right? That's the joke that McCain always makes. I think one of the interesting things to watch will be if Roy Moore wins, Luther Strange loses, is what lesson does Donald Trump take from that? You can imagine a situation where it deepens his anti-establishment instincts that are already there. He will become convinced that they talked me into this and it was the wrong thing to do, and I've got to go back to the people who brung me here, kind of thing. And so I think you could see that outcome really deepening his sort of Steve Bannon.
That would really help the tax reform debate, right?
Yeah, that's really going to happen. I think similarly, the kind of what happens if Roy Moore wins inside the Senate Republican conference, right? A lot of Mitch McConnell's push to get the president involved in this came from his rank and file, came from the NRSC chair, came from the recognition from rank and file Republicans inside the Senate Republican conference that this is severely problematic for our team, for our very slim majority, if something like this happens. We need this to move forward. And so if Roy Moore wins, how they react, whether or not they start moving into their very specific corners, what this means for the NRSC, what this means for fundraising going forward, I think is going to be immensely important, not just for the next cycle, but for the next couple of cycles.
Or maybe just a year-long tweet war against Alabama. By the way, I'm from there.
Yeah, this is, yeah,
you could say that, yes. All politics very much is local. Up next, John McCain says no again. So what happens to the effort to repeal and replace Obamacare?
I work overtime when I can get it. I need my blood sugar to stay in control, so I asked about Traceba. Traceba is a once-daily, long-acting insulin that lasts even longer than 24 hours.
I need to cut my A1C. Traceba works like my body's insulin, releases slow and steady, providing powerful A1C reduction.
My week, hectic. My weekends, my time. I can take Traceba any time of day, so if I sleep in and delay my dose, I take it as soon as I can, as long as there's at least 8 hours between doses.
Once in use, Traceba lasts 8 weeks with or without refrigeration, twice as long as the Lantuspen.
Traceba is used to control high blood sugar in adults with diabetes. Don't use Traceba to treat diabetic ketoacidosis during episodes of low blood sugar or if you are allergic to any of its ingredients. Don't share needles or insulin pens. Don't reuse needles. The most common side effect is low blood sugar, which may cause dizziness, sweating, confusion, and headache. Check your blood sugar. Low blood sugar can be serious and may be life-threatening. Injection site reactions may occur. Tell your prescriber about all medicines you take and all your medical conditions. Taking TZDs with insulins like Traceba may cause serious side effects like heart failure. Your insulin dose shouldn't be changed without asking your prescriber. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing, fast heartbeat, extreme drowsiness, swelling of your face, tongue, or throat, dizziness, or confusion. Ask your healthcare provider if you're Traceba ready. Covered by most insurance and Medicare plans.
Nothing in Japan is done without reason. I love that. It's partly why Japanese cuisine is my favorite. It's so detailed and purposeful. It's the same with taking a flight. From the aircraft itself to the cuisine and the service. The amount of care and precision taken in every action. It is truly a complete experience.
What makes a perfect island holiday? One that allows you to rest and relax, that lets you have new adventures, where you can be at the center of it all, or get to escape, where you can disconnect and reconnect with nature and genuine people. From the depths of the sea to the highest mountain views, one island has it all. Hainan, your island of peace, luxury, tranquility, and exploration.
Breaking down the walls in my own mind, keeping my faith for the bad times. Get up, stand like a champion. Take it to the world, gonna sing it like an anthem.
Lease a BMW X5 xDrive 40e for as low as $569 a month.
Tomorrow night, the final battle to repeal Obamacare is set. Supporters Graham and Cassidy face opposition Sanders and Klobuchar in a live CNN debate, moderated by Jake Tapper and Dana Bash. The fight over Obamacare. Tomorrow night at 9, only on CNN.
The local wine shop, a place where people go to get confused, frustrated, and end up picking pretty labels instead of great wine. Well, now there's a better way. At tastingroom.com, America's #1 personalized wine club. Every bottle is selected based on your personal wine profile, and fewer than 1 in 50 wines makes it through our rigorous selection process. We're so sure that you'll love our wines that every bottle is backed by our total satisfaction guarantee. The Huffington Post calls Tasting Room the first wine club to get it right. Get amazing wines at incredible prices, selected just for you, delivered right to you. Go to tastingroom.com and receive your exclusive tasting kit of world-class wines. Once you get your kit, taste, rate, and build your personal profile one sip at a time. It's a no-brainer. Great wine without the guesswork, backed by our total satisfaction guarantee. Go to tastingroom.com, enter promo code CORK9, and get your exclusive tasting kit, a $40 value for just $6.95. Tastingroom.com, code CORK9. Tastingroom.com. Taste, rate, enjoy.
This is CNN, the most trusted name in news.
Welcome back. Republicans have just 1 week to take advantage of a Senate rule that allows them to repeal and replace Obamacare with a simple majority in the United States Senate. They have a new plan, but an old problem: not enough votes. And once again, Senator John McCain is a central figure. Remember, his dramatic 2 a.m. thumbs down was the final blow last time. This time, he gave us more advance warning, saying Friday he could not in good conscience vote for the legislation known here in Washington as Graham Cassidy. McCain joined Senator Rand Paul in public opposition, which means just one more no vote dooms the effort to failure.
It's a little tougher without McCain's vote, I'll be honest. It's a little tougher, but we've got some time. You can't quit when you have 1 or 2 votes short. You can't do it. And those people are not going to be liked by the communities that they come from, because in most cases, in I think almost all of the cases, they got elected on the basis of repealing and replacing, and they are not doing a service to the people that they represent.
CNN's MJ Lee joins our conversation for this discussion. You've lost Rand Paul. You've lost John McCain. You only have 1 more to lose. Most people in this town think this is doomed. The president says he's not going to give up. They're keeping a lot of pressure on everybody, but the math here is pretty impossible, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have the 2 no's, the 2 public no's already, and then the other 2 that leadership is desperately trying to get on board, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins. Remember, they voted no last time, and they have been very clear that these concerns that they have, they're not even sure if there's anything that can be done to get them to a yes. And I don't know if I really buy the argument that's out there that, well, now that McCain has come out as a no, maybe we see a flood of Senate Republicans also coming out to say no. Because the last time when the vote happened, remember, this was a very, very close vote. We did not actually see a flood of Republicans say, well, now that we know that this vote is not going to go through, that gives me sort of the freedom and the permission to go ahead and say no. The Dean Hellers of the world still ended up voting no. And I think it comes down to this great quote that Chuck Grassley gave to reporters this week. I think that we should be running that on our Chyrons the entire week.
Let's do it right now, because it's just awesome. This affects every single person watching this program who lives in the United States. This affects 1/6 of the United States economy. That makes it a pretty big deal, right? Quote, you know, I could maybe give you 10 reasons why this bill shouldn't be considered, but Republicans campaigned on this so often that you have a responsibility to carry out what you said in the campaign. That's pretty much as much of a reason as the substance of the bill. So essentially, this thing is kind of flawed. It's a car with no tires and no engine, and the chip in the computer doesn't really work, but we're going to vote for it anyway because we have to keep a promise. That's not a great sales pitch.
And yet that's exactly the reason why it came back from the dead, right? They went home from August. They heard from constituents a lot, but also from a lot of donors who said, you promised to do this. We made sure you got a majority. Now it's time to deliver on what you said you were going to do. That carries a lot of weight for a lot of people, particularly when it's been kind of the premier promise that you've made, and you currently hold majorities in the House, Senate, and you hold the White House. And I think for Senate leadership, who really kind of had a stiff arm towards this idea for a long period of time until they flipped, because when they were meeting with members of their conference behind closed doors, they realized that the pressure was really there and that they had continued to promise this. Now, kind of to MJ's point a little bit, one person who's involved with this process told me yesterday, think about whatever your sports metaphor is about how desperate this is, and that's where we're at. And he said Hail Mary is probably too generous at this moment in time. But as MJ's pointed out, keep a very close eye on Senator Lisa Murkowski. That's the key. If they're quadruple bank shot, if you will, to actually make these numbers work is somehow the changes they're making behind the scenes right now get Lisa Murkowski on board. That creates some kind of momentum. Conservative groups converge on Rand Paul and try and flip him. Everybody thinks Susan Collins is gone. And then somehow the momentum carries over. You got 6 days, you got the end of it all, maybe it happens.
They have to rename Graham Cassidy the Penn State bill, and Penn State football bill, and see the Nittany Lion last-minute Hail Mary bill or something like that. But you mentioned Rand Paul. The president tweeted right at him this week. He said Rand Paul or whoever votes against health care bill will forever be known as the Republican who saved Obamacare. This is not just a test of Mitch McConnell's vote counting, Lindsey Graham and Bill Cassidy, whether they can sell their legislation, but we were just having the previous conversation in a different context. How much sway does the president have over his own party? He's repeatedly tweeted at Rand Paul. They spoke several times during the past week, and Rand Paul says, no, I'm a no. This is not Obamacare repeal. We're lying to people when we say it's repeal. I'm not voting for it.
He also voted for skinny repeal, which is certainly less conservative than the option put forth now, which is more of sort of a healthcare federalism. Look, this gets to why people are so angry at Republican leadership. They won 4 national elections on this. Democrats are wiped out on every level across the entire country, partly because Obamacare was a car without wheels that was sold as the greatest car ever sold.
You like your racetrack, you can keep your racetrack.
Yes. And so when they come to Washington and they're, look, I'm realistic about what could get through here, and this is a minor change to fix some problems with Obamacare and the fact that the individual market was completely tanked by it. But there are a handful of Republican senators who don't want to do anything. There's a status quo bias in healthcare that the only reason Obamacare got past it is because a lot of people and a lot of willing accomplices ignored the fact that it would change things and would change many things for the worse. There would be winners, but there would also be losers, and we made up the fact that that was not true. The president told us that that was going to be the case, and it wasn't. And so now they're here having to admit that, yes, there will be winners and losers, and when you make changes, that's what happens. And people don't want to make those changes because then they'll be responsible for the downsides, because there are always downsides.
And in addition to Rand Paul saying this is Obamacare light, you have all these various medical groups, the American Medical Association, the American Cancer Society, the Medicaid directors, a large number of groups, including Jimmy Kimmel and a number of governors, saying that this is not a good bill. So they're up against that obstacle as well, with several people saying that this bill is not going to improve the health care situation.
And by the way, suddenly the left is like, lobbies and corporations know what's best for you.
That is a great contrast. That's true, but you're right. The newly made Republican, he switched parties. Governor of West Virginia came out over the weekend and said very bad. The governor of Alaska, we mentioned Lisa Murkowski, the governor of Alaska, saying this very bad for my population. We'll watch that. What does it tell us about John McCain? This will be one of his last acts in Washington, D.C. by most accounts. He's had bad health news. He's fighting brain cancer. He's here in town getting treatment. He decided to get out ahead, not wait for the actual vote, not wait for them to bring it to the floor, to give them a heads up. Last time, to your point, some did vote yes, but some of them did that knowing McCain was going to kill it. And they thought politically, I'll vote yes now because I know he's going to take this down with me. What does this tell us? It tells me, and I know that he had one meeting with Leader McConnell this past week where Leader McConnell surprised him by having Lindsey Graham waiting when Senator McCain got there. That made Senator McCain mad. He described it to somebody as being put in a hot box, trying to be pressured to cast his vote. He would not do that. It strikes me that he wants his legacy to be that he stopped this. Is he stopping it because he thinks it's bad policy, or is he stopping it because he thinks he's the person who's going to somehow force Washington to go back to bipartisan conversations?
It's the latter, because he's noted several times that the block grant idea is something that on its face he supports. And part of the reason why this came back is because he said multiple times that the idea that Senator Graham and Senator Cassidy were working through, both on a conference call a couple of weeks after the July implosion occurred, that like, okay, I think I'm okay with this. I think I'm good with this. It's the latter. It's the process. It's the legacy. It's all of these things. And I think the most interesting element of the last 6 days, I think, is I probably ran into and spoke to Senator McCain 10 times on the Hill. He never wavered. He never changed. And while we were trying to figure out, well, is Senator Graham, because they're close friends, is that going to be the change? Or is he going to be? No, he made a very, very poignant and pointed speech on the Senate floor in July. He followed that up with his no vote. The idea that all of a sudden he was going to flip, knowing that wherever his career ends up, this is certainly going to be a big moment in that career. I think when you talk to people around him, they just kind of scoff at the idea that at some point he was just going to change his mind all of a sudden, particularly given the process, particularly given the compressed timetable. That was kind of what I thought all week is he hasn't changed what he said all week. Why are we all surprised that he ended up coming out?
He also knew all that when he ran on repeal, by the way.
And on the legacy point, you know, it's impossible to have a legacy of being the person who bucked his own party over the issue of process when there's a second vote and you vote differently the second time. If he voted that way the first time, in order to keep that legacy, he has to vote the same time. The same way, rather, the second time. And as Phil said, the process hasn't changed. This is another attempt to ram a bill through in a completely partisan way. And McCain has been clear all along that he has very, very serious issues with that. And he does not want the Senate functioning this way anymore.
Except for when he was running on repeal, when he knew that this is how this process would go down.
Right. No,
all that information was available.
Oh, there is a lot of, shall we say, room of mirrors to this debate. And I will say we have a week to go. We'll see if they can pull this rabbit out of a hat. But this goes back to me to the transition. The moment Donald Trump won the election, they should have started conversations about how we're going to do this together with the president, with the speaker, with the majority leader. They should have started then. They waited until they got to Washington. Then it got messy. They all had their different things, but we shall see. Up next, Rocket Man, Madman, Barking Dog, Deranged. The North Korea nuclear standoff gets personal.
When we acquired, Supercross, the premier motorcycle racing series, we found ourselves in the dirt business. And
in
the dirt business because our shows perform on dirt.
You need a lot of dirt.
We need a lot of dirt.
To the big deal in the beer business. This was really the big deal in the beverage industry, but it also sets the stage and tells us something about what's happening in industry. Giant mergers and acquisitions.
Well, I think you've got companies over the last several years, they've taken a lot of cost out of their business, and now it's about how do we continue to grow.
Feld Entertainment, Ringling Brothers, you guys have been together for a while, but you've also expanded and grown in other ways.
You have to change, right? If you're not changing, you're not growing. It's really about finding something that can really fit in with what we do, but also that can enhance what we do. When we acquired, Monster Jam and Supercross, we really saw, an overlap with our consumers. It was an audience that we knew.
Elena hits on a lot of really good points because at KPMG, we tell our clients that if you don't believe you have really privileged insight, that you should be very careful. And so a lot of the due diligence process is establishing that insight and then building a value creation plan that really helps you achieve it.
The companies who do this the best are the ones that have a strategic plan. These are the markets we want to be in. These are the companies that are available in this space. But you also know when to back off, right? Because saying no is really, really tough.
Bigger is not always better.
That's a hard point to make to clients, right? Bigger is not
always better. There's so many cases. In history, there's a path of all these big deals that were done that did not produce the results. There are situations where these acquisitions are extremely valuable, but it's not easy.